Thanks for downloading show 176 of the C-Suite podcast. My name is Russell Goldsmith, and together with my co-host Graham Barrett, on this episode, we'll be focusing on event marketing. Now, no matter what industry you're in, the chances are you'll find a calendar full of trade and exhibition shows of all types and sizes. It's a chance for established and fledgling brands to showcase their products and services, to engage with the live audience, strengthen existing partnerships, and to find and win new business. But how do you select the right show for your brand? What are the advantages of event sponsorships? What are the priorities when designing your exhibition booth? And most importantly, how do you measure the success of your presence at an event and ensure that all-important ROI? Graham.
Yes, and to answer these questions and more, Russ and I are delighted to be joined online by two guests who partnered with the C-Suite podcast last year and took the show to events that their companies were sponsoring. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Miranda McLean, Chief Communications and Sustainability Officer at Banking Circle Group, Adam Burak, Events Manager at Free Markets, and then finally, we also have with us Emma Duncan, UKI Events Leader at IBM. And Emma, I'd love to come to you for the first question. Can you give us some insight into how you choose the right events for IBM and maybe some of the outcomes you're trying to achieve?
Absolutely. And I think, you know what, the most important step is having like a real clarity about what those business outcomes are. So whether that's boosting sales in a particular area of the business, or if you're just trying to drive like a more general awareness. But I think it's also important to note at the start here that whatever that event strategy is, it has to be a cohesive part of that overall marketing strategy, so that the events aren't just sort of like done in isolation. They're chosen by design as part of your overall client journey mapping. But I think to answer your question, I think there's really sort of 5 key things that determine, you know, what events that we choose. One is having that clarity around the outcome, so awareness and versus demand generation, how many leads, what looks like success. Second thing is message. Is that event theme aligned to the topic that you really want to talk to? And then, of course, following the message is the audience. Does the event attract the right job titles from the right companies in your target market? And are you looking to nurture existing relationships, or are you in the business of kind of new client acquisition? And I think in that sense, getting randomized lists of job titles and company names from previous events can really help in determining if this is really the right audience for you. Number 4 is kind of engagement. What opportunities are there for you to tell your story, and how can you actually engage with your audience? And then 5 is action. So are you able to capture data that enables the team to follow up post-event? And I think once you understand those 5 things, you can make some decisions around the mix of third-party multi-sponsor events, great for new client acquisition and actually meeting existing clients. Third-party sole sponsorship, where you want something a bit more bespoke, specifically just for you. And then proprietary events, where you're sort of building on that existing relationship that you have.
Miranda, we worked together twice last year at Money 2020 in Amsterdam and Las Vegas. But those were just 2 of the events that Banking Circle Group sponsor. What I thought would be good is maybe, first of all, if you can just quickly introduce, you know, the company, but then talk through the kind of events that you've targeted and you know, how the strategy has evolved over time with those.
Sure. So Banking Circle Group is a financial technology platform with a licensed bank at its core that provides businesses with financial services solutions that they can then leverage to build out their own customer propositions. So an example of that might be enabling cross-border payments, or card issuing solutions, or embedded finance. So that's the business. In terms of our event strategy, we launched the business in 2015, and we used an event to actually launch the business. So we used that as our launch platform. We chose back then in 2015 the biggest event in the fintech space, because obviously we wanted to cast the net wide. We wanted to, you know, hit as many people as we could to raise awareness around our brand, raise awareness around our propositions, but also, you know, do some demand generation in terms of, you know, acquiring new customers and generating some leads. And of course, there are hundreds and hundreds of conferences now in both fintech and payments. So obviously we can't be at them all, but fast forward 8 years, The brand has now developed. We're a successful business. We're no longer a startup. We're an established business. We've grown our client base. We've won multiple awards. So the brand is much more established. So now when we go to events, although we do continue to work with the big event producers and be present at all the big industry events, there's less of a brand awareness because people do know us. There's the strategy is more around meeting customers, actually connecting with them face to face, because we don't get that face to face time. We're a digital business, so it's not like you can walk into a shop and have a chat with us. And of course, also that there's always the lead generation piece with any event for us. So yes, that's how the strategy's evolved. We do nowadays also having, I'm not going to say, big budgets, but certainly bigger budgets than in 2015, we're able to also attend smaller conferences, so smaller, more targeted conferences in the regions that we are targeting. So, an example of that might be MPE in Berlin, Paris FinTech Forum in Paris, obviously. So actually, getting local salespeople in front of customers locally at smaller events, as well as being present at the big ones.
At what point did you develop from, or does the strategy develop from exhibiting to becoming a sponsor, to becoming like a big sponsor?
I think, for us, we take a view with events of partnership. And, at the beginning, budget really dictated what we could and couldn't do. But nowadays, we do take a more integrated marketing campaign approach to events that we're present at. So we work with the conference producers from the outset to see how we can integrate into the event and really just maximize our presence there, the engagement that we're going to get. So that's everything from actually saying, okay, so branding is going to be present in all your pre-event marketing, but also we'll do a lot of pre-event marketing to let people know we're going to be at an event. We'll make sure that our website has a landing page where we can tell people we're going to be at an event, where they can register their interest to meet with us. We try to, as much as possible, also have a speaker or, a moderator or, someone actually doing, so that it's more than just an exhibition stand. So that there's multiple touch points to engage with us, our brand, our people at the event. Many times now, especially at the bigger events, we have a copywriter on site attending key sessions that we've identified ahead of the event and doing a summary blog at the end of each day, and that goes out on our social media channels along with photographs of our stand and what's going on our stand, just to continue that engagement for people who aren't there as well as for the people who are there.
And any success stories in terms of, I don't know if you can, how much detail you can share, but in terms of actually signing a client there and then at an event?
We do have long sales cycles, but we often still do sign clients. So it could be that salespeople have been having conversations with a certain prospect, and then that deal gets sealed at events. So that does happen, which is always great news, because clearly there has to be an ROI on events. But many times, we've had some of our key clients, took perhaps 3 years, 2-3 years to actually come full circle and sign. So it does depend, but yes, we do sign business on the stand, but more often than not, it's coming in later.
I think it also just shows the importance of going to where your clients are, whether they're kind of new clients or existing clients. If you go to the right place where your clients are, then, those are the sorts of, outcomes that you can hope to achieve.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Adam, let's bring you into the conversation now, because similar to Miranda at Banking Circle, we recorded this podcast at FinTech Connect with Free Market at the end of last year. So could you just give us an intro into Free Market and some more specifics about your kind of role as events manager? How do you choose those events and what are your key objectives?
Absolutely. So our company was born from a vision to break down the barriers to international trade and remittance. So our senior leadership team has 150 years combined experience across banking, capital markets, fintech, professional services. So we are a global cross-border payment provider, and it's extremely important to us to have the key value proposition communicated at events as well. And I think this is the most exciting time of the development of the company so far, because we grew so much in the last, let's say, 2 years, and events as a possibility to drive sales came only like a year ago. Literally like a year ago, we had our first exhibiting. I wasn't even with the company. I came on board afterwards. And I think what is extremely important to us is that we are a small company in terms of size, but we have 500 corporate clients at the moment. We're growing extremely fast, and it's extremely important to us what kind of picture, what kind of brand awareness we are creating around ourselves. And I think events are one of the key factors in that. But also, as you mentioned, and also what Emma mentioned earlier regarding attending the right event, there is a lot of planning within the marketing team as well. Where are we going, and what are we where are we going to attend? What are we going to sponsor? Where are we going to be partners? Which one we are only attending? Because my single goal here is to drive sales. So I'm a sales-oriented events manager at the company. So all our efforts at the end of the day are shown by how many contracts we were closing this year.
And just to follow up on that, I mean, are you looking to, as we just asked Miranda, are you looking to sign deals there and there on the spot?
It happens sometimes, but our sales cycle is quite long as well. So just to give you an example, we started a conversation with one particular client at an event at 2021, and we closed that particular prospect in 2022 at the same event. So 1 year later. It happens sometimes that as well.
Yeah, so there's a lot of behind the scenes where you're kind of tracking where
Exactly.
all of these sales have come from. And that's really interesting that you can track them back to these individual events. So that must be quite rewarding in a way.
Yes, we have a first point of contact kind of system. So we are able to trace it back. Where was the first conversation? And then we are having, as Miranda mentioned, multiple touch points from there. Sometimes we have 9 touch points, watching something online, reading a white paper, talking to various departments, and until the prospect converts.
Just listening to what you were saying there, Adam, I mean, one of the things that I was keen to understand was the importance of face-to-face meetings, you know, now that we're coming back to in-person events. Miranda, thoughts on that?
I think it's a big focus for us, and our salespeople are really looking for that engagement with the market. I was actually at the B2B FinTech Marketing Conference this week. So a big shout out to that amazing community. But one of the sessions I attended was actually all around events, and they had a poll. And the question was, you know, what type of event is driving the most impact for your business? And I noted down the answer, actually, especially for this podcast. 71% of the attendees, there were about 200 people in person at this event, said that in person was driving the most impact for them. 24% said hybrid, and 5% said virtual. So I think it's unanimous that now that, especially post-COVID, people are still really looking for that that face-to-face engagement that only conferences and events can really deliver. And you do have a captive audience there. You know, they're there for the event, they're there for the conference, and they're there for the duration, and you get their undivided attention, which is quite unique. Whereas if I'm running a webinar, for example, you might find that, you know, somebody's looking at their screen and, you know, multitasking, which you get less of that. You get better quality engagement face to face for sure.
Emma, I can see you nodding away there.
Well, I mean, I think it's about connection, isn't it? I mean, as humans, we want to connect to people, and that sort of face-to-face contact, you know, it works well for our subject matter experts and our sales teams on site, and really importantly, it works really well for the delegates, they get to have more of that quality interaction and experience. And I think that is the beauty of live, is that sort of that face-to-face interaction, the opportunity to engage, to tell stories differently, and those things resonate, which is what makes it a I guess like a stickier experience for everybody, a higher value experience.
Emma, let's stick with you. One of the questions that I wanted to look at, I mean, we've talked about the different types of events and, sponsoring and exhibiting and, numerous levels that can take. How do you go about building your presence with the organisers of the event? And is there a deal to be done with them at some point?
Well, I'm a big fan of if you don't ask, you don't get. So I think it's always worth having a conversation. But I think that really comes from knowing your audience, your target audience, and how you want to interact with them. Part of it, of course, as Miranda was saying, is down to the budget that you've got. So that might limit you. However, if you know that you want to sort of reach out, is it important to you to be able to sort of demonstrate something? Is it important to you to be able to have a platform to talk to a group of people? And you're in the business then of, do I turn up with, have I got an exhibition space, which could be something really small, from sort of like, 3 meters by 2 meters, through to I'm going to have a huge space, and I'm going to have a keynote, and I'm going to have a theatre session. And many sort of event producers do kind of look at other sorts of add-ons, whether that's kind of appointment setting for particular clients that you might be interested in trying to establish a relationship or connect with. And so I think, when you look at these packages that come out, obviously the event producers need a way in which they can sort of try to sort of create something that makes sense for the majority of people. But if you see an aspect of a package that you think, because of the sort of conversation that I'm trying to have with a particular type of audience, actually that would work for me. And so I think it's always a really valuable thing to do, to have that conversation with the event producer, because they want sponsors to get value from the exhibition too.
I mean, is there a deal to be had? I think it's really hard to ask for a deal. The providers that we work with, the event producers, they certainly don't offer deals. The most they might throw in is an extra pass here and there. But I think that if you really value the event, then, really and truthfully, are you looking for that deal? I think, we're very selective about the events we go to. If we try something out, usually we don't try it out cold. So we'll send a delegate or two in the first instance to, check it out, see whether they feel there's value in us having a presence. But on the rare occasion where we have just gone all in and, exhibited or sponsored and it's not worked out, then we don't go again. So I think it's in everybody's interest, and to make the event work for the for the client, which is us, as well as those attending, so that they're getting value from it, to just ensure the longevity of that event. So I think it's not necessarily about getting a deal, but just assigning value to an event and understanding that if we only do these 3, they're the best 3 to do for the year for us, and we will continue investing our budget in those few that we know actually we get the value from.
But just taking something that we've worked with you on, as I mentioned, with Money 2020, where you are the 5-star sponsor. So you've got a 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. How much, is the kudos of being that 5-star sponsor, does that make a huge difference compared to if you'd only gone for 4 stars?
Look, I think the reality is, and I may be generalizing here, especially in a recession, but the reality is those that take the bigger sponsorships are typically, what you're reflecting there is that you're a more successful business. That may not necessarily be true, because your strategy one year may also be just to actually, I'm not going to put as much into my events. I'm going to actually have a strategy where I do more one-to-one customer engagement, or I even might decide to run my own events. But normally those with the bigger brands have got the bigger budgets, and they're the 5-star sponsorship. So I think that those associations are made in people's minds. So it's about putting your best foot forward and saying, here we are, we're big, we're successful, come and work with us. And for those people that are already working with us, it kind of reinforces, oh, we're working with those guys. Look at how successful they are. Look how big their stand is, And I think that whether we like it or not, those associations are made in people's minds. I'm not sure that there's that big a difference in being a 5-star or 4-star sponsor. Money 2020 is certainly good at putting your brand everywhere. But if you are 5-star, you definitely do benefit from having additional branding and visibility at the event, both pre-event, during event, and post-event.
I think it's really important, especially for us, just joining to Miranda's comments about which events we are picking and what kind of sponsorship we are having there. We are evaluating really closely every event. So usually the strategy is we are sending salespeople to attend first, and then next year we are evaluating based on the results and based on their feedback where we would like to have a brand sponsorship or we would like to exhibit or something, because these events are expensive. And you need to know that you are putting your efforts in front of the right audience.
And let's stick with you, Adam, because we've been talking a lot about, the cost of these events, the budgets that you guys assign to them. I mean, I don't know how much detail you can go into, but are any of you happy to talk about budgets, or at least what percentage of the marketing budget would go towards events?
Yeah, I can tell you exactly that it is 60% of the yearly marketing budget devoted to events with us.
Okay.
So I mean, going back to the conference that I attended this week, at that same session, there was a question about how much budget is spent on events. And again, I've noted down the numbers for the purpose of knowing what questions would be happening today. But 39%, so this is a B2B fintech marketing audience, 39% said 10 to 25% of their budget went on events. 35% said 25 to 50%. So that's very close to, those that spend 10 to 25%. So that was almost evenly split, with only, 13% saying less than 50% and 13% saying less than 10%. And I'd say, we certainly fall into that 50-60% camp.
Look, I mean, let's assume that, you've selected your event, you've done all your sort of like prep. Let's talk about the actual physical booth that you're going to have in this exhibition space. How much time goes into designing and creating it, and also what are the key things to consider? Miranda, let's stick with you while you're on this one.
So we work with a fantastic stand design company, and we've been working with them almost since the beginning. So I started with one and then switched these guys, and we've worked with them ever since. They're called We Are Pie. They're a B Corp, so I'll come on to that sustainability angle in a second. But we've worked with them continuously for the last 8 years or so. And, when we're thinking about, so the design process starts, 6 to 9 months out from an event, especially with those larger events. We focus on having a very clean design. That's us, not all brands want that, but we want a clean design that delivers impact. And of course, it has to be on brand. And so We Apply are very good at understanding that. And we challenge them, every single time to come up with a new design that meets those criteria. But in terms of considerations, when we're designing the stand, we have to think about things like how are we planning to use the stand. So when we were having the C-Suite podcast on our stand, we had to consider where would you be located on the stand? What space would you be using? And how did that impact the rest of the stand? So that's one consideration. I mean, this year, for example, at Money 2020, we're actually building in some water coolers in the stand, knowing because we have some refillable bottles as giveaways, knowing that people are going to fill their bottle, we didn't want it to be an afterthought of where those, water coolers were going to be positioned and have people tripping up over them on the stand. So that's been built into the design. So the other big consideration is how do you stand out from the crowd at these events? There are huge show floors where we typically exhibit hundreds and hundreds of stands, and they just all look pretty similar. So how do you look different? How do you make an impact? How are you even found from across the hall? So that's another big consideration for us. And then finally, there's that sustainability angle that I mentioned at the start. We do take that seriously. We at Pi are actually a B Corp, and they publish the numbers, and I can't remember them off by heart, but if you go to their website, they publish the stats around how much wastage is generated by the events industry every year. Because of course, if that's not considered, then there's a lot of material that has to go to landfill. We build stands that are 100% sustainable. That's one of We Are Pi's, that's kind of their core. That's what they do. So our stands can break down. They can be recycled. We donate furniture or pieces of material to charity many times. If there's not a way for them to be recycled, but typically all of the materials we use can be broken down. So that's also what we consider.
Emma, any other considerations?
I think, for us, the starting point is really kind of like the messaging architecture, because we've got to be really clear on the messages that we want to get across. And then what we try to do is take that messaging architecture and work out what do we need in our space to tell the story that we've designed, because I think it's important to have some sort of synergy and clarity, because otherwise you end up putting kind of random stuff on there. Everything on that stand has to be in service of telling the story that you want to tell. And I think exactly to your point, Miranda, it's how do you stand out? How do you tell a story in an eye-catching way, invite somebody to engage with you in a way that's a bit different? And at Tech Show London, for example, this year we had Spot the robot dog, who was able, he was walking around the event. He was on our stand. We were able to talk about sort of all things automation and AI. We have invested in kit to show holograms, and we're sort of building out different activations that can showcase things in there. So it's just giving somebody an opportunity to go, oh, what's that? Just enable them to step into your space to start that conversation.
Adam, any thoughts?
We are really much in the brand awareness stage. A lot of people heard of Free Market, but a lot of people haven't heard of us. It is great for me to hear that people are coming back after we've been to 2 or 3 shows, and they are saying that, oh, Free Market, you guys are everywhere. And it's just a great feedback for us that what we are doing in terms of presence and interactivity, it is working. And I'm really much focusing on interactive activities. So this is why the C-Suite podcast came into play at FinTech Connect last year, because we created an entire recording studio implemented in the design of our booth. So people were coming over and they were like, what is happening? Are you recording a live podcast here? So it's just like how you are getting the eyeballs, how are you starting the conversation with them? Is this interesting enough to go there and figure out what's happening there? At Sigma last year, for example, we had a 2-meter high Jenga tower that people could play together with, and they were literally taking out one pieces of Jengas as pain points our platform is solving. So how is it connected to our messaging? How is it connected to what we would like to talk about? And is it interesting and engaging enough to go there and try it out?
Well, I'm going to have to follow that up, Adam, because you've cued me in nicely. I mean, obviously, Graham was at the FinTech Connect with you, but how did you find that whole kind of process of recording the podcast on the event stand?
It was absolutely great. We did it for the entire first day with time slots. We gained a lot of traction. That's what is going on there, and then what are people talking about, and then we usually had people audience standing around and seeing what's going on. So I think it was a great brand awareness activity. But in the meantime, we had such interesting conversations that we are using since then and resharing because the value that we created, I think it was quite extraordinary with the special guests talking with you. So I think it had multiple benefits.
That's great to hear. Miranda, obviously, yeah, you mentioned it, and I sort of touched on it in my intro, but we did that for you twice at Money 2020. What's been your kind of thoughts and feedback of that process?
Well, I think, for us, I think there were really four key value items that came out of working with you guys. I think the first one was, you brought to our stand targeted, hard to reach senior executives who love to be interviewed. They love to talk about what they're doing. Then you brought a lot of professionalism around that. So effectively, you brought people to our stand that we would not be able to bring to our stand had we reached out to them. And we were able then to introduce them to our salespeople and create sales opportunities. So I think that's the first thing. The second one we've already touched on, which is, creating buzz and a point of differentiation on our stand. So seeing the camera crews, the microphones, seeing these people on our stand, it gave us that buzz, that point of differentiation. As I mentioned earlier, we're always looking to do something different at the stand to have this point of differentiation from everyone else. And I think that really did that. We were the first, I think, at Money 2020 to use you guys. So that was excellent for us. The other, huge thing it gave us was loads and loads of great content. So, we had great content, not only during the event, but also after the event. So creating that buzz on social media, that then got extended further because the corporate businesses that we were, the social media teams of those corporate businesses where you were interviewing their CEOs were also sharing that content to their network. So we had that multiplier effect going on social media, which was invaluable in terms of that association with the brand and so on. And the credibility. I think the fourth point is the credibility that brings, having these people on your stand associated with your brand, people walking by seeing these really senior leaders on your stand just adds to that credibility and that association with the brand. So I think lots and lots of great business benefits of working with you guys.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you. And what about, you mentioned water coolers. What other tactics can you use to get the right people over to the booth and not just, let's call them the freebie hunters? So, what other things other tactics can you recommend people listening to this?
Well, firstly, I think it's really hard not to have freebie hunters. I think they will always come onto your stand, especially if you've got good freebies.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to deny it. I picked up a number of.
I was going to say, I'm going to put my hand up. I go and seek out those good freebies myself.
I came home from Vegas with a whole bunch of new pairs of socks that I thought that was the most bizarre thing for people to give away. But there was a number of different booths that were giving away socks. So I thought, I'll take them. But sorry,
Absolutely.
Go on, carry on.
But yes, but in terms of drawing the right audience, we have used tactics like launching white papers. They're very, very specific to the industry. So back in the day when we were still printing documents and bringing them along, we don't do that anymore really, but launching white papers at an event, getting the engagement through sharing blog content, as I mentioned earlier. Last year, something that was very successful is we launched a partnership at Money 2020, and we used one of their stages as the platform to talk about it. And we created a whole buzz ahead of the announcement and let people know that on our stand we'd be demoing. So once people had seen the actual announcement on the stage, they were able to come to our stand, and we set up a little demo area just for a couple of hours. And again, people that were interested in learning more about that partnership were able to come to the stand and see how it works live. So those are the kinds of things we've done. We've also worked with some of the local member associations that we're members of in our industry, who quite often say to us, "Oh, you've got a big stand. Would you mind if we hosted drinks or something on your stand?" So we welcome that because it also brings people from that network, from the industry, to our stands.
What I would also add to that is it just comes back to sort of tying your content to the experience. So, for example, we had a great story around blockchain that was associated with a coffee manufacturer, coffee producer. So we built a coffee stand and then was able to tell the story around blockchain, for example. So I think where you can tie the content to what's happening on the stand, because there's always a place, I think, at events for fun things to do that aren't specific necessarily to kind of content. But I think if you're really trying to drive that sort of quality conversation and opportunity for engagement, then it's really good to tie the stuff happening on your stand to the content. We've come up with like themes of things like, refresh, recharge, rethink. So come and get a coffee with us, charge your phone with us. But, we also have these talks that are running on as well, for example.
Well, what I was going to ask is, so we've talked through getting people to the booth. What about capturing their data? What's the process there?
So I think from our perspective, it's really important that it's done correctly. GDPR, obviously, regulation in place, which is very important for everybody. And I think different companies have slightly different postures around that, have slightly different interpretations of it. But the way that we approach it is that we have signage up. We make it very clear that if you allow your badge to be scanned, then that's that person's consent for their data to be passed from the event producer to the sponsoring company who scanned their badge. So it's about collecting the right permissions. And we even go a step further, whereas that is a permission for a follow-up. If we want to add somebody to the marketing database, we have to ask a different specific question. And so we're very, very careful about capturing the data. As part of that, it's really important to sort of make a note of the conversations that are happening, because it's all about things being actionable. Who did I speak to? What was the action for that? And then have you got the right consent to follow up with those people?
Yeah, great. And I think it'd be worth considering, what else that you have to think about before you undertake sponsorship on one of these events or attending one of these events. Adam, Miranda referred to the sustainability of the stand earlier. But what about just generally in terms of sustainability, in terms of people flying all over the world to these events? How much does that go into your thinking when planning these events?
I think it's really difficult to talk about how sustainable is flying people there when there are still expos out there I know of, and obviously not going to name them, and they are throwing everything away after the event. They literally said that there's nothing from the materials, the design elements, nothing that is reused. So I think that concerns me a little bit more than flying to the events. But linking it back to the hybrid events, webinars, and in-person events, I think we really need that connection. So I think that we need to meet face to face, and we are trying to keep our numbers low when we are going away, just to reduce the footprint as well. And I think with a smaller team who are really focusing on the task, we are working better.
I think from sustainability, it's kind of reduce, reuse, and recycle, and it's doing as much as you can of all of those things. And I know that there's the ILA framework, which is helping people to sort of really understand what their carbon footprint is across an entire event. And then B Corp that you mentioned as well, Miranda, that status that event producers are sort of working towards. So all of these things are pushing things in the right direction, but it can be very difficult. It's difficult decisions to have to be made in order to sort of facilitate, achieving these sustainability gains, because often stand designs vary from event to event, space to space. So all of the time you have to be thinking, how much can I reuse, how much can I recycle and repurpose, etc.
Well, let's just move the conversation on a little bit now. We've talked about the planning for these events. We've talked about actually being at these events, how we capture the data, how do we make a splash at these events, using different points of different tactics, different points of differentiation. Ultimately, you need to ensure an ROI at these events. You need to make sure that the money you've invested is coming back in some way. So, Adam, do you want to start with this? How do you measure the success of an event?
It is very simple at Free Market. We just need to do our job well when we are bringing in the business, and then need to provide the high quality service. to keep them in. And also it is much more effective for us to go to a big event and then reach tens of thousands of people over 3 days than trying to reach hyper-specific targets via targeted ads on LinkedIn, for example, because they are already engaging with us, whether we are having a podcast studio, for example, or we are having any kind of challenge like a cold pressed fresh juice shot challenge when you need to figure out 4 of the ingredients and then you get a giveaway when you manage to figure out 4 of those. It is already a connection. It's much easier to convert that to a lead, and then to on like some point of the journey convert them to a client.
Emma, what about you at IBM? Is that similar to your experience? What kind of metrics are you using?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're sort of looking at it from a view is, okay, so how many people did we plan to talk to, and did we talk to the number of people that we plan to talk to? And some of that is actually down to the enablement of the team that you put on site, and how diligently they're sort of following through and scanning up and writing their conversations and all the rest of it, so we can capture all of that information. So, responses planned versus actual. Are we sort of meeting with the people that we hope to meet in terms of, from the right companies? But ultimately, I think it's about the conversions as well. So what proportion of the people that we have spoken to actually then sort of convert into an opportunity? And of course, downstream from that, what opportunity is then won?
Yeah, Miranda, could we just come to you on that point in terms of ROI and how you measure success at events?
Yeah, I think that with event success, it starts in the pre-planning before the event and goes all the way through to post-event follow-up. So our sales team, ahead of any event, especially if you're a sponsor or an exhibitor, you typically get access to the platform where you can see who's going to be there, and they're reaching out and booking meetings ahead of the event. And the success comes from literally having full diaries before we've actually traveled to the event. And typically our salespeople are fully booked before we even arrive on an exhibition stand. And then it's about the quality of the engagement. So just echoing what Emma and Adam have been saying, but the quality of the engagements that you're having, the quality of the leads that you're generating, and and then obviously those that convert, so that those sales conversions, those opportunity conversions that happen post-event.
Listen, guys, we've covered a huge amount in a very short space of time. Thank you so much for all your contributions. I just thought I'll give you the chance to plug where you're going to be over the next few months, just in case any of our listeners want to come and find you. So, let's go around our virtual table here. And, for the rest of 2023, Adam, where can listeners come and find you guys? What events are you going to be at?
The next event we are preparing for is going to be Money 2020 in a month, where we are exhibiting. And we have a really interesting challenge because we are partnering with a UK charity, and we are going to raise funds for them for cancer treatment for over 2 months period of time. I cannot go into more details at the moment because the official comms hasn't gone out yet. But this is what I can say. It is going to be really, really exciting. Also, we are going back to FinTech Connect in December, and we are attending various events in the meantime. We're going to go to SBC Gaming to Barcelona, for example, in September, IFX Cyprus in Limassol, Cybos in Toronto, and we are going to go to Money 2020 Las Vegas, where one of my colleagues, Alana Chandratov, is going to speak as well.
Emma, where can listeners find IBM over the next few months?
We're really excited to be at London Tech Week, which is the 12th to 16th of June. That same week, we're going to be at NHS Confed up in Manchester. And then, we'll have our big proprietary flagship event called Think. So that's where you get the latest and greatest of what's happening from IBM. And that's going to be on October the 10th.
Miranda, let's finish with you.
Well, we have Paris FinTech Forum happening in May. We will be at Money 2020 in June, and EBA Day also in June in Madrid. We're going to be at Cybos in Toronto. Then Money 2020 US in Las Vegas in October, and ending the year with Singapore FinTech Festival in November. But all our events can be found on our website.
Listen, thank you so much. We'll end the discussion there. Massive thank you to all three of our guests, Miranda McLean, Adam Burrick and Emma Duncan. Thank you so much for joining us.
And we always want to hear what you think. So if you'd like to contribute to the discussion, you can do so on our Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn and Instagram feeds. The links for these can be found at the top of the page at csuitepodcast.com. You can also catch up with all our previous shows and follow us for automatic downloads of each episode via your favourite podcast app. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, please do give us a positive rating and review. If you'd like more information on our event podcasting offering that Miranda and Adam have kindly talked about today, go to auderecommunications.com for more information. And you can see case studies there, plus you can get in touch via the contact form. Finally, if you'd like to get in touch with the show, you can do that via the contact form on the website. But for now, from both Russell Goldsmith and me, Graham Barrett, thank you for listening and goodbye.